Hello sisters, it's nice to see you again. This is my second video. Julie asked me if I would show you all how I make homemade wheat bread. And I just wanted to tell you about some of the ingredients that I use. You don't have to use all of these, but this is my favorite recipe that I use. I always grind my own flour. And so I have freshly ground flour here, and I like it because it's all warm and it seems more fresh, and also it helps the yeast develop a little bit better, I think, since it's warm. On the yeast, I always keep it frozen. If you just keep it on the shelf, I think it goes bad faster, but if you keep it in the freezer, it will stay good for a long time. And you'll be able to tell if it's good if it starts to develop and grow when you put it in the water. If it doesn't do anything, then your yeast is bad. Another thing that I use is dough enhancer. And if you don't, I think the stores do sell dough enhancer, but if you can't find it, you might be able to find it at Kitchen Needs. It is over on just off of 7800 South and Redwood Road. It's a little bit north of Redwood Road. And the reason why I use dough enhancer is because it gives your bread a smoother texture, and also it improves the taste and a good crust, and it makes your bread lighter. And Vital Wheat Gluten strengthens your dough, and it also gives you a lighter texture, and this also improves the taste of the bread as well. For my oil, I use coconut oil. You can really use any oil you want, but I think coconut oil improves the taste and also is very good for you. And so I'd rather use coconut oil than vegetable oil. Some people use other different types of oils as well. And I like to use honey instead of sugar. And this honey that I have is raw honey. And so it hasn't been processed or heated in any way. And so I like the raw honey, and I think that that's more healthy for you. So those are the ingredients that I use, and so I'm going to start with the bread now. Okay, I have started my yeast, and to do that I got the water pretty warm, not just lukewarm, but a little bit more than between warm and hot. And I put the yeast in there for it to start to develop. What I'm going to do next is to put my honey in with the yeast and water. And my honey is not very melted, and so putting it in the warm water is going to help dissolve the honey. And the yeast loves the sweetness of the honey, and it will help the yeast develop by putting the honey in first. One thing that the yeast does not like is salt. And so I put salt the very last. I put salt right in the middle of my flour when I'm putting in the flour, because I want to give the yeast as much time to develop before I put the salt in. Okay, I'm going to tell you my recipe, and I will also repeat it as I'm putting things in. This recipe makes 2 to 3 loaves of bread, and I did 3 cups of the warm water, and it needs to be between 105 and 119 degrees. And then I used 1½ tablespoons of yeast, and I used 1/3 cup of honey. And I also already melted my coconut oil, And I have put the coconut oil in the bowl, and it is a 1/3 cup as well. Okay, now I'm going to do my dough enhancer, and I'm going to put 1 tablespoon of dough enhancer and 1.5 tablespoons of Vital Wheat gluten. And now I will pour, this is my yeast and water mixture. Now before I do the salt, I'm going to put a little bit of flour in. This recipe actually calls for 5 to 7 cups. And I don't really measure it that much because I really look to see what it looks like in the bowl. And we'll talk about that as well when I'm putting it in. So I'm not going to divide it off the top or anything like that. So I'm going to put some flour in, and I'm going to put my salt in, and the salt is 1 tablespoon. And turn it on for just a moment. Hopefully you can hear me as I talk and put in the flour. I'll put some in before I turn the mixer back on. Okay. I know it always takes a lot more flour than I think at the end. And so I'm going to turn this on and see how it's doing. Okay, I can see that it is very runny still, and I put 5 cups. So I know I'm going to have to put in quite a bit more. Okay, I almost forgot to tell you about some of my secret ingredients that isn't on the regular recipe. I will usually put some flaxseed in, and that is just really good for you, and it makes the bread look, you can see the little flax in it. And my other secret ingredient is almond meal, and that also makes it look really nice and pretty on the inside. It makes it look more like homemade wheat bread. And I don't really measure it, although I'm putting 4 tablespoons in this one. And it also gives it kind of an almond taste. Okay, I'm done putting the flour in, and you know when it's done when it pulls away from the sides really well. You don't want it to be too sticky, and you don't want it to be too dry. When it is pulling away, then you know that you've put enough flour in it. And now I'm going to show you kind of what it looks like. It's a little bit on the sticky side, and it's better to be on the sticky side than on the dry side, because if you do it on the dry side, then your bread won't be as moist and hold together as well. Okay, I used a little bit more coconut oil, or you could use olive oil as well on your counter and also on your hands as you're kneading this around. And so this is a really nice, soft feel to the dough. And probably one of the most important things that people always forget to do is to roll out their dough, and that helps get all of the air bubbles out of it. I tilted the camera so you could see the dough and what I'm doing. And I'm going to roll it out really well. And that helps all the dough to mash together to get out all of the air bubbles. And you're going to kind of make it a little bit flat and just roll it out really well. And you can see that some of the bubbles will be in your dough, and you can kind of be popping the bubbles. The reason why you don't want air bubbles is because when it's cooking and you have air bubbles, then that's where you get the big holes in your bread. And this really prevents any holes in your bread by doing it this way. Okay, I took away about half of that dough and rolled it out flat again. And then I'm just going to start here on the side. Roll it up like this. And then I'm just going to tuck the sides in. Until everything is nice and smooth and tucked in. So it's about that size, and here's my pan. And so you want it to be about pretty close to the size of your pan, kind of tucked in the sides. And I've already greased my pan. You just put it in, kind of pat it around the top. So it's about that size in your pan. Now, there is one thing that I did not do that I usually do, and I usually let it rise one time in my bowl before I make my bread. And for some reason, it seems like that second rise is really good for the dough. And I have some extra dough still in my bowl, and it has been rising. And so that extra rise is going to be good for the dough. So we'll see you on the other side of baking the bread. Okay, the bread has risen. You can see the little speckles. That is from the almond meal. And now I'm going to put it in the oven at 350 for 25 to 30 minutes. Okay, here we have the final product, all done. So I hope you enjoyed learning how to make homemade, fresh wheat bread.